The other thing that I wanted to mention here is that today is kind of a special day. We have Jonathan with us, back again. He's the he has the title for the most PD talks in the series, but I wanted to tell you a little bit about the origins of these PD talks, right? So we're actually celebrating our 6th anniversary of this series. The first PD Talk was back in June of 2016. And as you see in these pictures, the PD Talk started as a face-to-face event. We used to meet in the Mark Twain Library here at Centro Cultural every 2 months, and we'd have 30 or 40 or 50 people together, and we had a great time. And if we had more than that, we would go into the theater for a couple of those sessions that had more attendees. And so now we're kind of back and celebrating. Unfortunately, this time we don't have cake to share with you. You have to enjoy some virtual cake or find some cake in your house. But I do want to give a couple of interesting details. This week I was looking through a lot of statistics for this program of PD Talks, and so far this is our 45th talk over these 6 years. We've done 21 face-to-face, and now that we are doing them virtually 100%, we've done 24. We've had a total of 37 different speakers from 8 countries. And thinking about attendees, we've had 4,599 attendees, or attendances, let's say, to these talks over the last 6 years. So that's quite an impact. And we're not bragging or anything like that, but we just want you to know kind of what you are a part of. And what's been most exciting for us these last 2 years since the pandemic started is the number of attendees from other countries. Just in these first 5 talks that we've had of 2022, we've had attendees from 31 different countries. So that's absolutely mind-blowing. It's something that's beyond what we expected when we started this program 6 years ago with 35 or 40 people gathering together in person. So it's really great how much this community has grown. So just a couple of memorable talks to think about, some milestones in the way. Jonathan's talk was the very first one, Why Use Literature in the Classroom, way back in June of 2016. Jonathan's was also our first recorded talk. We did about 16 of these talks and then realized, you know what, we should save these and share them. And we started to actually record them and then edit the video and share it in our community of practice. So his talk, Foundations of Oral Communication, way back in May of 2019, is the first one that you can find in the COP. We also very soon after that started trying to think, how can we get more people involved in this? And so we had our first live stream back in September of 2019. So we had it there in the library, but live streamed on Facebook Live. And just a couple of months later, another milestone, the pandemic forced us to do it 100% virtually for the first time. And it just so happened that was another talk of Jonathan's, Core Beliefs on Online Education. And we're never, I think, going to go back to that 100% face-to-face format again, just because we've grown so much and we have people connecting from all over the world. And we decided at the beginning of last year, we have so many people joining, and it's actually, there are benefits to being online, that we can actually do this monthly instead of doing it every 2 months. And so we started a monthly format at the beginning of last year, which we continue to do to this day. And so here we are with our 6th anniversary, and I'm happy to introduce our speaker for today. So most of you already know Professor Jonathan Acuña. He's a virtual language professional with over 25 years of teaching experience, and he's currently the head of curriculum design at Centro Cultural Costarricense Norteamericano, and he's a senior ELT professor at Universidad Latina de Costa Rica. For more than 8 years, Professor Acuña has been teaching online in synchronous and asynchronous content and language courses. He holds a master's degree in education with an emphasis in English language teaching, an associate's degree in teaching and learning in higher education, and another one in online, hybrid, and blended education by Laureate International Universities. Jonathan is deeply interested in fostering student construction of learning through meaningful learning experiences. And here to speak with us today with a presentation, Helping Learners Notice What to Do in Oral Assessments, please help me welcome Professor Jonathan Acuña with a warm virtual round of applause. So if you have your cameras on, please wave your hands, give a thumbs up, and say hello.
Well, it's nice to be back again. Well, to be honest, I've never loved, being away from this thing. So the fact is that it's always nice to get ready and start like doing something else so we can obviously share a little bit of what we have been discovering and at the same time, let's say, uh, practicing in the classrooms in order for us to become better at what we are doing. So people, let me start sharing my second screen. And if you see me seeing in this direction, is because I'm working with two different monitors, and then I obviously need to pay attention to this side of the screen where I have most of the information that I'm going to be sharing with you today. All right, people. This is what I have planned for today. And these are like the different things that you are going to be helping me work throughout this session. To start with, the agenda will include, let's say, 4 different moments. The very first thing that we're going to be paying attention to is what makes speaking hard. The second part of my presentation will be with the opposite. What makes speaking easy? The third stage is going to make us think a little bit about the question, how can I structure an interactive task? And at the very end, we will work around together in order to create a speaking task. So, as you may pay attention, we are going to be exploring the reasons why speaking turns difficult for learners. I'll be giving you a couple of teaching techniques and student strategies that can be used in the classroom. I'll try to give you some extra ideas to create simulations for interactive speaking. And obviously, at the very end, as I said to you, although it says like you can describe the topic at this section here, because I didn't include anything, to be honest, over there, it's because you are the ones who are going to be describing how this task is going to be created. Before we begin anything, we're going to be having a quick conversation here. And I'm going to be asking Mark to divide you into smaller groups. And I want you to pay attention to this thing that says go check, ask for, and give advice. And you're going to be having a conversation around the topics that we have over there. I'm not going to be giving you a lot of time, people, but I'm going to be just having you work for some time in some breakout rooms. So I'm going to encourage you, highly encourage you to obviously turn on the camera, turn on your microphones, so you can definitely have a conversation with the people who are going to be over there. Okay? All right, people. So, Mark,
All right. Yes,
let's
let
go
me go
ahead.
ahead. Should I share the link to the
Ah,
resources with him?
yes,
Okay.
please, please,
All
please.
right. So if you look in the chat, everyone, there's a link that we just shared, and that will take you to a PDF with a lot of information. You only need to do what's on the second page. So if you don't mind, Jonathan, I'm going to just share the screen real quick so they can see what that PDF looks like. So if you click on that link, you'll have access to this. Of course, you have the title page, but all we're focusing on right now is this second page, and the instructions are there. Okay. I guess I wasn't sharing. Here you have it. Okay, so I'm going to open up the rooms and let's get started.
Okay. And little by little, everybody is coming back into the main room. You see, now we had to work on some kind of a smooth transition, the way that it should have been at the very beginning. Okay, well, I was paying attention to some of the answers that you were providing to the questions. And there are lots of things that were said that obviously need to be taken into account. But on top of the things that you have been discussing, I also want you to consider some other different aspects. What are those things I'm talking about? Well, let's begin with this quotation. Back in 1994, Bailey and Savage, in the book New Ways in Teaching and Speaking, stated this quite interesting fact. Speaking has long been viewed as the most demanding of the 4 skills. So you may or you may not necessarily agree with this. I tend to connect to the statement because of the following things that I want to share with you. So what makes speaking hard? Well, take a look at the following thing. I was listening to one of our partners here today, teaching in Mexico, that classroom size is a problem. But I also have to admit that maneuvering among breakout rooms might also be a problem that sometimes we don't necessarily take into account. What about the interlocutor effect that prevents learners from being at ease during a conversation? Do you talk to people in the same way that you talk to your boss, that you talk perhaps to the president, that you talk to your students, that you talk to your brother or sister? We don't talk to the people in the same way. And that was very interesting. In the very first task that I asked you to go and talk about giving and providing advice, guess what? Many of you might have been like in shock because you didn't know who you were talking to. So obviously there must have been a way for you to ease, let's say, the situation and then like introduce yourself and then get into discussing. So the interlocutor effect that prevents anyone from being at ease during a conversation, it's something that we also need to take into account. And what about the interaction effect that forces the speakers to listen to other speaker, in this case, like in a one-to-one conversation, to catch up on the conversation? You see, all of a sudden you're talking about A and you forgot. You mean you can lose track of the things that you were saying very easily. And then you might be also in need of some kind of strategies like, what is it that I was saying? In order to get the assistance from the other person who is talking to you. And what about the types of tasks created by the teacher? Once again, are you working on responsive or interactive speaking? Responsive here is understood as this type of questions that you find in the TOEFL test. They're given a prompt and then they have to obviously say something about that. Or this much more connected to interaction. So this interactive speaking it's a free dialogue, but with conversation strategies, obviously framed within what you are studying. So see, this could be obviously something else. What about these other different things for a moment? The most common types of speaking activities that probably traditional teachers will be using the most. These two for sure. Imitative tasks. Are you having exercises where learners drill on a given formulaic structure? It could be. And what about these intensive tasks? Activities where students practice a grammatical, lexical, and or phonetical series of units to yield well-structured, accurate forms. Though they seem to be similar, I'm talking about the imitative and the intensive tasks, they are rather, different in essence. So those are things that also we need to take into account. Hopefully, what we should be looking for is the incorporation of two more different types. I'm going to be very honest. Sometimes some imitative or intensive task is needed, but they shouldn't be the norm. We should also look for these other two different types of tasks, responsive and interactive. As I mentioned before, in the responsive task, we are talking about TOEFL-like exercises. Here, the learners will demonstrate what they can do with the language they've been learning. But in the other one, where definitely we are fostering interaction, the students find themselves engaged in freer conversations with course partners linked to class content. And again, these are things that probably can also help you understanding why sometimes it's hard for the students to talk in class. Of course, I can relate to the things that you were saying. Students don't have the vocabulary. Well, for that particular example, why not to go back, for instance, in some kind of intensive task where they can complete a dialogue? And then we are sure that they are, as I said before, yielding this grammatical, lexical, or phonetical series of units correctly. But once they have, again, like some kind of degree of mastery of the language, why not to engage them in these other two different things? Let me go ahead, people, and we're going to be discussing again a little bit I want to go to the other extreme. What makes speaking easy? What techniques, this is like, again, self-reflective questions. What techniques can I employ to make speaking activities easy for learners to handle? And what strategies can students use? Okay, so Mark, again, you're going to be projecting this again.
Yes.
And don't forget, 8 minutes.
8
Once again,
minutes.
8 minutes.
Okay, here we go.
Okay, once again, I guess like the question was quite interesting to go to the other side of the pendulum, trying to understand like what makes things hard, but what could make things easier. And you were saying some interesting things that I want to retake. So let me project again my second screen. All right, so here you have the questions again. What makes speaking easy? I want you to consider some of the following things as well. Techniques that I should teach in the classroom. I think we definitely have to work with people, with our students, by having dialogues in peers or with peers. That is, remember again, it all depends on what kind of a student you have. If they are low learners, perhaps we need them to memorize the dialogue and practice, practice, practice so they can perform. So that's one way. It could also be like practice some phrases to improvise later. This is obviously for someone who is a little bit more into, like global ideas than rather like remembering every single, line in the dialogue. And why not to overtrain around more ideas? That is, sometimes this thing about overtraining consists of, if you're going to be giving a, let's say, for example, the dialogue presentation with a partner, so you have like very specific things that you're going to cover in that conversation. But in case you forget something, you can have something else, so you can obviously use the time wisely. The idea is to give students also real life situations. We want to recreate that situation in your mind and practice. What does that mean? Again, a lot of the things that the students are probably doing is, and maybe this is something that happened to you when you were learning the language, is that you mentally had these conversations. I often remember something that a professor of mine, when I was a student back in the 80s at the university, used to tell us. She used to say, like, if you don't have a conversation partner, talk to yourselves. Anyway, don't you talk to yourself all the time, even in Spanish, for example? So why don't you do it in English? So you don't have a conversation partner? Well, why not to use yourself as the conversation partner? And of course, with this, you can think about what you want to say in a given situation that, for example, the teacher is proposing. If there is something that needs to be prepared beforehand. Why not to find a partner and role play the conversation? I guess today is much easier in terms of, technological advancements, in terms of you can get, in touch with somebody else, practice something without having to go away from your home. Not like what I have to do in my time, right? That I have to definitely go and find someone and have a face-to-face conversation. I think that's also important in these real life situations to coach our students with a little bit of small talk. Have them work on small talk. This is one of the other things that sometimes happens. For example, when you assign a task in class and the students, in less than 2 minutes, they are finished with something that they were supposed to be discussing for 8. So why not to go ahead? As I always tell people in my classes, even at the university, I don't have any problems you people socializing, but do it in English. Why to switch back into Spanish if you can perfectly have the same conversation in English? For in-class presentations, definitely you have heard this before. This is nothing new. Practicing right in front of a mirror. Yeah, this gives you a chance of seeing what you're doing, even it starts with gestures, hand gestures, facial expressions, and the like. Why not to practice difficult words in isolation? You might be using specific things that you want to obviously stress during the conversation. And because you need to emphasize them, I think it's a good idea that students can go and work on that thing in isolation. And they can come to you if it is necessary. Teacher, how do you pronounce this? Right? What about recording yourself and then watch your performance? Once again, doing this today, it's so simple that you just need to have a smartphone. And then you can watch again and take a look at what you were saying. There's no worse critic than you yourself. And people can be definitely unhappy with the result of things. I remember, for example, once I had this experience with my students at the university where I asked them to actually create a recording about a given thing. And there were people who reported that they created the video 8 times because they were never satisfied with the final result. What does that mean? 7 times they prepared until the last take. That was the one that was submitted to the platform. Great, there was great practice over there. And then again, why not to go and practice in front of other people? So again, you might get together with partners and partners can obviously listen to you and you listen to them in order to get some kind of feedback. So again, these are simple strategies: dialogue with peers, real life situations, and in-class presentations. Yeah, we can have dialogue with peers. And these dialogues can be obviously prepared beforehand. These real life situations, like you say, for example, you are going out with a group of, let's say, English speaking people, and you want to be able to talk about something at least with them. Or like the in-class presentation, what should be done beforehand? Now, this is much more connected to probably what I was paying attention on, the different things that I was able to listen. I have here like 3 different labels: preparation and practice, imagery and physical response, and use others, but in a good sense. That is, in terms of preparation and practice, learners can write drafts of what they want or need to say. But definitely, we need to keep in mind the following thing. These 2 individuals that are present in your classroom, the student who is focused on form and the student who is focused on meaning. The focus on form students are the ones who probably speak the less because they want to be careful with the things that they are saying. Not only that they are enunciating correctly, but whatever they are saying is also grammatically correct. Whereas in this case, the focus on on meaning students are the ones who, regardless of the mistakes that they're making, they are taking part of the conversation, not really taking into account that they are obviously making mistakes. The big question is, which of the 2 students do you want to have in the classroom? And keep in mind what I was saying before. If they are afraid because their affective filter is so high that they cannot even say anything because of this, what I mentioned before, this interlocutor effect. In terms of imagery and physical response, students need to use visuals when they are obviously having some kind of presentation, or props if it is an in-class conversation. Hopefully, if this is happening face-to-face. In the real world, things might work in one way, and if you're teaching remotely, perhaps you need to think of a different strategy for students to use. But why not, for example, giving them let's say, for example, the virtual background, if they're performing, let's say, a conversation that is going to be taking place, say, in a supermarket, then you can have a background of a supermarket. I mean, this is just an idea. The next thing is, why not to use mnemonic devices? Remember what I mentioned before? The mod, that was the first mnemonic device that I used. Who remembers what mod was? Memorable, usable, durable. If you still remember that, it's because you were able to connect to this. And sometimes this is what the students need. Maybe they just need like certain things that they need to remember in order to perform. Okay. What about gestures while you're speaking? I don't know, for example, how often you use your hands, how often you use your body, obviously, but there is something that definitely needs to be endorsed, and students need to learn how to use hand gestures to make emphasis and other kind of things, you know, depending on the type of, in this case, speaking activity that they are performing. Why not also to work on association of words to pictures? What do I'm trying to say? Perhaps instead of giving students, for example, I just have this crazy idea in my mind right now. Say that you have students who are going to be performing, for instance, ordering food at a restaurant. Of course, there might be something connected to this association of words and pictures by giving them, for instance, some kind of, let's say, menu. But what if the menu, instead of having words, it actually has pictures? So people need to recognize what they see over there in order for them to, for example, order what they want to eat. Instead of giving them the word hamburger, then you show them a picture of a hamburger. Or if it is, again, whatever that could be, right? Using others in a good sense is get a conversation partner, speak to others and practice the language with them. These people can be critical, yes, but they can get critical feedback that can help the students perform better the next time. How often when you were learning a language, for instance, you know, you were practicing with someone, you said something, and then the person said something, right? What about creating enough risk and pressure to succeed? This is something that students don't want to get into. One of the things that obviously we need to keep in mind is when we're learning a language, we need to take risks. And we need to feel this pressure on, you know, on top of us or upon our shoulders, because in the end, what we want is to succeed. We need to understand that we're bound to making mistakes, and that is fine. And if you're going to be looking ridiculous, what's the big deal? You're not going to see these people again in your lives if it were the case. But the important thing is using the language. And finally, why not to give learners? Good learners don't learn how to speak in isolation. None of them will be learning English just because they want to, let's say, interact. How can I say this? Let's say with a book, which is there is no interaction actually. And you may say there people, or say teachers, what about like this idea of some students using English to work around their strategies, for instance, when they are playing video games? Still, they're not working on this in isolation. So this could be some kind of bot that is giving instructions and everything, and the student needs to somehow interact with instructions that are being given. See what I'm trying to say? So students should, you know, prepare and practice, no doubt. They could be using this imagery so they avoid, for example, if it is a presentation, including long texts in their, for example, PowerPoint slides, to give you an example. And of course, using others in a good sense is practicing with somebody else definitely can give you lots to think in terms of how you're pronouncing things, how you're structuring things, or how the other person is pronouncing things or is using certain things in context. Next discussion. How can I structure an interactive task? See, we have been talking a couple of different things here. We were exposed to a situation where you were given no instructions whatsoever, and you were just thrown into a breakout room, go and talk. Then I started asking you, one, what makes speaking hard? And then what makes speaking easy? And now it's understanding these two different things, easy, hard, or this easiness and hardship. Well, people, let's go for this. How can I structure an interactive task? How would you go about creating an interactive simulation for assessment, whether that is for, formative or summative? And what elements should be considered? When you come back, obviously I'm going to be sharing my thoughts about this so we can put together with your own ideas. Okay, so let's go back again to this 8-minute
8
mark.
minutes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Well, people, we're back in the main room. 8 minutes sharp. You see? Okay, let me project my second screen one more time. And I want you to, follow me again on this thing. So how can I structure interactive task? There were many different things that were said, and I'm not going to be contradicting anyone, but I'm going to be helping you build on your criteria for the creation of an interactive task. What does that mean? Let's consider the following things. How can I structure an interactive task? Take a look at the different things that you have over here. And I'm going to label them with something much more concrete. That is, okay, the very first thing that I want you to notice is this. Students are provided with roles. So take a look at the instructions there. Ask your partner about his or her activities on Saturday. And student B says, ask your partners about his or her activities on Sunday. You are assigning a specific role to the student. So the student already knows that, okay, if I'm talking to Oscar, then Oscar will be student B, so he will be asking me about Sunday, but I'll be asking him about Saturday. What's the next thing that I want you to pay attention to? Second important thing, the interaction topics. So there you go. If I am on Saturday, asking about Saturday, what do I need to ask? I need to ask Oscar what time he gets up on Saturday, of course, not on Sunday, but he's going to be asking me about the time in which I wake up on Sunday. See, not only you have now the roles, but also you have the specific things you want them to discuss. What's next? You have the task instructions. In pairs, practice the situation or situations, depending, right? Student A, student B, ask extra questions if necessary. And then you will have 10 minutes, prepare your presentation, and be ready to present in the main room. So far, we have 3 different things. What's missing? What do you think is missing? You can include that in the chat box. What's missing here? A 4th element is not yet there, visible for the students. Okay, the timing somehow is there when you say 10 minutes. So there is a little bit of timing already considered. Okay, so Jose said report. I mean, like perhaps you're making the grading criteria. Okay, of course, I agree with that grading criteria. If there is a rubric, because you're thinking of having something like an oral exam. But if it's just something in class, maybe the rubric is not yet necessary. Okay, I like that thing that Pedro Calvo says, like the structures they will be using. Somehow they are over here, right? In the way that the topics were created. So again, if you take a look at the verbs, so we're having some kind of simple present for routine activities, but it's a very valid observation. Maybe you can be very much more specific and mention those things. Well, definitely I agree also with this thing about modeling the activity and concept checking. Yes, of course, before you ask students to go and do anything, so it's a good idea to check and model the activity with them. Yeah, the grammar and vocabulary somehow are covered over there. All right, the topic are there somehow. As I mentioned, we have the interaction topics. The guidelines are somehow like everything here are like the guidelines. Okay. All right. Well, let me tell you, at least from my point of view, the one element that is missing. The strategies, the conversation strategies. Not only we have to remind our students that they need to use certain vocabulary and certain structures, but we also need to include this thing about other different strategies. Vocabulary for routine activities, in this case, time expressions, correct verbal constructions, as you were mentioning before. And then having the conversation practice, for instance, turn taking and showing interest by asking more questions. This could be very specific conversation strategies that we can, include in this practice. All right. Now, I wanted to include this thing here because maybe the concept of conversation strategy is not that, transparent or clear cut for some of you. For those of you who have, let's say, worked with Touchstone by Cambridge University Press, you might have found that there is a section where they have this overly explained. And I just went over there and, well, snipped some of these things in order for you to understand what I meant by conversation strategies. The very first one that you take a look at there is, for example, showing students how they can use the question, how about you, to ask the same question that you were asked. How are you today? I'm fine. How about you? Do you like pizza? Yes, I do. How about you? See, we don't need to be repeating this thing. Simple strategy, and it works. What about asking for help in class? How do you spell? What's the word for this in English? Repeating words to show interest. She's from Paris originally. Paris. Wow. Blah, blah, blah. What about, for example, saying more than yes or no? That is like giving something like, okay, do you like to live around here? The question could be yes or, answer with yes or no, but why not to say, no, I live about 10 minutes, 10 miles away, or yes, I do like here because, and then you give a reason for that thing. Asking two questions to be less direct. So what do you do after class? Do you go straight home? Or showing that you have something in common with us, something as simple as this, like me too. I'm starving, me too. Or keeping a conversation going with the extra questions. I'm here for a week. That's great. Are you enjoying Laguna Beach? And there are many. And I think like if you simple Google those things, you're going to be finding certain things that can be quite interesting that you can be simply incorporating in the lessons that you are teaching students. Okay. So an interactive task, internal construction includes, as we have been paying attention, student roles. So they need to know what they have to be or who they are in the conversation. Second, we have interaction topics. The specific things that you're going to be asking students to discuss. There are instructions and timing. Then the conversation strategies. And finally, people, your students are ready to rumble. So they can go now and start having the conversation. They know who they are in the conversation. They know what they have to ask. They know how much time they have to prepare and perform. They know which conversation strategies, vocabulary and grammar they need to be using in their conversation. And then let's go and do it. You see, you're making these things visible for them. You cannot simply expect that they are going to be knowing that you want them to do something like this. So that's why sometimes when you try to materialize a speaking activity in the classroom, it doesn't materialize the way that you want it to be, for obvious reasons now. Okay, remember the first activity we had? How can we improve this activity? How can we make this situation interactive? Remember, these are the things that we have over there. Roles for the learners, interaction topics, task instructions, and conversation strategies. I think you already have the interaction topics: clothing, food, hotels, money, places to visit, transportation, shopping, and when to go. But I think like the other different things, as I mentioned before, they're definitely missing. So let's have again another, what time it is? I guess we can have like, roughly speaking, a 10-minute discussion over there. All right,
Okay.
so let me stop sharing over here. And then you're gonna be sent to work for the next 10 minutes. And let's come up with some ideas. How can you improve this strategy? I mean, this with the corresponding strategies that we have been mentioning here. Roles of the learners, interaction, instructions, strategies. Okay, let me project my second screen one more time. And I think there are many different things that can be said around these different things. The first important thing that I want you to notice is, as I said at the beginning, many of these things that are provided in books are not what I would say complete. I was listening to Tobias, and Tobias said something important. The interaction topics are provided there. What do you need to talk about? Clothing, food, hotels, money, places to visit, transportation, shopping, and when to go. Got the information there, but we don't have the roles. What do you propose? I guess like now we can allow them, if you raise your hand, we'd allow you to open your microphone. So what could be proposed over here in terms of roles for the learners?
A travel agent with a person or tourist trying to travel to a place and then giving some recommendations of what to do.
What to do. I agree with that, Jose David. And what about, for example, being a little bit more specific? You can provide them the place. Okay, so we have Pedro and then Oscar.
Yeah, we were saying that maybe if we have the students from the same country and maybe having like a conversation like different countries is not possible because they don't have like the experience. We could think like one student, it's like a backpacker traveling around, I don't know, let's suppose Costa Rica, and they get to a town and they are asking a local about what clothing and what food they should eat in that specific place. We're thinking about that.
That's a nice way of approaching, obviously, the topics, yes. Asking for and giving advice, that's happening over there. Good. Mr. Viques, nice to see you.
Thank you, Jonathan. I will say that I'm more inclined to go over the money topic and ask students to think about the new types of modern forms of money, like to find out if in these places that they are willing to accept cryptocurrency right now, or if they're familiar with the concept of blockchain and cryptocurrency and how they transform it into fiat money, which is real normal money, and how can they go back and forth in order to handle this in a decentralized new economy. These assets are very important, and it's not something that everybody knows. So it will give them a chance to learn something meaningful and new.
That's a good point. I guess there was someone from El Salvador here, so they will be obviously accepting, you know, another kind of currency that is not dollars, for instance, as part of the, you know, like the economy right now. Good point. Excellent. Now, what about the instructions? What kind of instructions should students be given over here? Any idea? Anyone?
Well, could be the instructions, they are going to be very clear, because if the instructions are complicated, most of the time they are not follow you, right?
And when you say, like, for example, in this case, like the instructions that they need to be clear, what exactly would you tell them in those instructions?
Well, I will try to give into you the idea. Well, in my case, I work in a primary school, right? So
Mhm.
the instructions in my case, they have to be very clear, because if I will say more than my point, they say like, teacher, I don't understand.
Sure, you need to be like very concrete with the
Yeah,
things. Yes, I
yeah.
understand.
Mhm.
Good point.
May I say something?
Sure, you may.
So in the instructions, what I would like to do first is, if I have access to a video, I will show up a video. In this case, I have seen some videos about people interacting with others in a touristic place, and just for the students to have an idea of how to start. I mean, it's not exactly that vocabulary that they are going to use, but just to see them how people interact in that kind of situations. And then I will have the role play cards, in which one of the students is going to be like, a student A is going to be doing this, a student B will be doing this. So they will have to read the role play cards. And then I will also, I will have them do a little bit, just some rehearsal before doing the actual activity. I would add in the instruction, in the role play cards, like vocabulary that they are expected to use while interacting. The time, I would add the time in those cards too. In that way, it's going to be more clear for them what they have to do.
Granted, I agree on that. Good. People, let's move to number 4. Depending on what you planned, what strategies do you think would be useful to remind students that they can use while they're having those conversations?
Maybe the use of should for asking for and giving advice.
No doubt. Okay.
I was also thinking, in that moment, if they have their mobile devices with them, and if they want to explain the meaning of a word. So with my group, we were talking about food. In many countries, there are very specific type of ingredients that do not have a translation to English. What they can do is just to go to Google and show a picture and first explain. Just to have, for the other person to have a better idea, show a picture of that.
That's a nice one. Where are you from, Aida?
El Salvador.
You're from El Salvador. Okay, so again, so if we have like, I don't know, pupusas de loroco, right?
Yeah, loroco,
So then like you need to show that. You need to show that because
loroco.
obviously they don't know what that is.
Okay, yeah. So they need to, even if I explain what loroco is, they wouldn't have a clear picture. When I show them the picture of loroco, okay, so now I know. Okay. But you see, besides, like the definition that we may give, sometimes I think the listener will really need a picture just to figure it out.
Good point, especially if you're not familiar with the thing.
Correct.
I knew it. One of my best friends is from San Salvador, so that's
why. Okay.
Tobias, go ahead.
I was thinking about this conversation strategy about asking questions to clarify meaning, because since we are in this, we are exchanging information, we might need to ask for clarification. So that would be a good conversation strategy. Excuse me, what do you mean? Excuse me, what do you mean? Excuse me, do you mean this? Do you?
Exactly. All those expressions are necessary. like that. Like in this particular case, like if you don't know, for example, this extra ingredient that pupusas can have, then it would be a good idea. Like, so you mean that that is like a flour that is added to the pupusas? The strategy is there.
Correct.
Excellent. Okay, Maria Francia, you were going to say something. You may go ahead.
Yes, well, I was trying to speak at the beginning, but it is like a round table. Every small group will be divided in clothing, hotel, money, everything. And then though, it's like a TPR, you know, the tables are running with everybody with different group giving different information. So everybody knows about everything. So it's like a, for me, it's like an intermediate level or higher level because it is asking about advice and different. There is a variety of vocabulary that I see. So it is like explore many things. You will have a lot of information in this activity. So it means like for me, it's a TPR. You move around from one table to other table. So everybody has a general idea of this topic.
That's nice. That's quite nice. And that's something that obviously that could also be done, for example, at least in Zoom, that's something possible to do, like allow students, for example, to go to different places or different rooms where they have been assigned a specific topic, like clothing, hotels, places to visit, shopping. And that would be a very interesting activity. I agree on that. Okay, that would be obviously part of the task instructions to let them know, okay, like you need to move around, you need to go here, you need to go there, you need to collect information here. And maybe part of the thing is at the end is like you need to come up with a report. I mean, just trying to figure out something else that could be done, of course.
But you need to have also a list of questions because we help the students, like a modeling question to ask, to get information for every group. You really need a list of questions as a question bank to help the student to ask questions for the communication because they need them.
I agree, no doubt. Anybody else, people? Okay, so I suppose that you understood the point about this. So let me go ahead and I want you to take a look at the following thing. This is like my bonus, can I say, piece of information or advice for you. Take a look at the following things. Speaking strategies for teachers, not for students, for teachers. 1, whenever we're talking about, foreign language learning, we need to understand that there is a language ego. All of us become someone slightly different as soon as we have to speak a foreign language. Some people have said, at least from my, from my experience, let's say sometimes I say that I tend to use like highly formal language, especially when I am speaking in English. And maybe it's true, but this is not me when I'm speaking in Spanish. So I have a different, quote unquote, personality, language ego, when I use a different language. And the students are going to be there in the same process to discover what their language ego is like. So we need to understand that these people need to develop that language ego. Interesting concept. What about the next thing? As a teacher, ask questions. Yes, ask questions of all kinds. Let's keep in mind that they are natural, a very natural part of any conversation, looking for real life answers. Yeah, the teacher must be there asking questions, but not yes, no questions. Usually information questions. A yes, no question, unfortunately, is yes or no. The information question might be, obviously, and why do you say that? What is your opinion about this? Where can you find that? We need to create a classroom ambience that invites people to speak freely and naturally. I always remember this thing from Dr. Neil Anderson. You might have seen, obviously, him in one of our conferences or in one of the PD talks. But Dr. Anderson, I remember when he was a visiting professor in Costa Rica, he used to talk a little bit about, this classroom culture that needs to be created where people are free of making mistakes. So if you look ridiculous, it's okay. You're ridiculous in the classroom and nobody should be, you know, let's say, humiliating you because you are doing something wrong. You are discovering if you are doing something. And that's exactly the same thing that happens with the students. The students are sometimes uncertain of saying certain things because they are not sure that what they are saying is correct or not. And one of the things that I like, at least with my classes, most of them today are, well, I should say not most, all of them are virtual. So even in a virtual environment, I try to create this nice atmosphere so people can feel that we have an, let's say, a free humiliation environment and people can make mistakes. And the last thing is the feedback. Learners see teachers who give feedback as someone who wants them to do better. And we, I guess, all of us here are obviously looking forward to seeing our students doing better the next time. No big wonder why sometimes we correct them. We correct them for obviously that specific reason, not because we want to simply make their life miserable. No, we want them to do better and better and better. We're just getting to the end. Interactive activities, the working plan. So what is the working plan around this? This is what we have been covering today, people. We already know that we need to provide the student's role. That could be your phase one. You have the topic. You need to divide that into 2 different or 3 different participants in that conversation. You need to identify the specific topics they're going to be talking about. You have to think of what instructions you're going to be obviously giving them. They could be standard instructions, but they need to be there. You need to think of the, okay, conversation strategies. What is it that you want them to use while they are obviously given or, you know, given a presentation or performing some kind of conversation, role play if you prefer. And then we have the in-class execution. This is in-class work. Now, this is the time in which students are, as I wrote before, rumbling. Now, when they are finished, it's the time for feedback. This is your post-task work. And then, obviously, depending on exactly what you did, you have the assessment part. If it is formative, you have already discovered if the students were able to meet, let's say, the objective that you had for that day or not. And if some reteaching needs to be done the following class. And if it is summative, I'm assuming that you will have your rubric, and based on the performance, you will be grading the students and providing them with the results the following class, along with any feedback that you have for them. So people, what are your takeaways? What are your own conclusions about this? Once again, I'm not going to be contradicting things that you do. I'm just trying to help you build on what you already do by providing you with extra ideas. That's it. So I don't know if you have any special takeaway from this presentation in which we are celebrating our 6th anniversary.
Right,
Yeah,
so
I agree with you,
I would
Pedro.
like, this is Heiner, and I would like to add something. I cannot open my camera
Okay, no problem,
for a
Heiner, go
certain
ahead.
period, right? Okay, but I would like to say something. I really appreciate the time that you invested in doing this, because I think that is extremely important for us as English teacher, because at the very end, we want our students to speak, right? And those are excellent tools that we can make use of in order to plan. And that's my point in this part, that more than what we want our students to do is the job that is behind the scenes. I mean, what we do as English teacher, because you have shown us this this process that's an English teacher we can follow in order to plan an activity, a task that can be significant for our students and can really make them to speak and use the language properly by using all this information, strategies, use vocabulary, the prompts, the roles that they must have in the speaking activity. So I think that is the planning that we take and the time that we take in order to plan each activity for our students to perform. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your words, Heinen. Thank you.
Also, I would like to add that me as a student, each time when I connect to each PD talk, I have a more clear idea of how to be one day a good teacher, using all these techniques and tips and also on what you have taught me during all these sessions. So in this session, for me, it was not clear how can I improve my future students on speaking skills, because it's one of the most difficult to take from the students, to get them to speaking. It's difficult. As for me, as a student, it's difficult for speaking. So as for students, I can put myself on their own place. So this is giving me a lot of ideas. How can I do in speaking activities? This, I have many notes here. So thank you. It's a very good session today. As always, I am very grateful and happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for your kind words. Yeah, there are some things that were included here in the chat box, and I think they are worthwhile paying attention to. One of them is, once again, oral assessments and tasks require preparation to obtain the best out of the students, no doubt. So again, this is not like just go to page X in the book and then, talk about this and magically that is going to be happening. What Sergio also pointed out here is that we need to improve oral assessment activities within textbooks. Yes, the textbook is not giving you the right answer at all. I mean, all the time. I think that they are a good point to start, and then they can be easily modified. So you can obviously add the elements that I've been mentioning today. Okay. Viridiana says here that the structure given to create a successful speaking activity is very helpful and that she appreciates the tips a lot. Good. Yeah, that's why we have like these sessions, to give you tips on things that could definitely be used. Like in this case, for example, for improving whatever you find in the books. Okay, Luis Jordan says the deepest thanks. Thank you. Thank you for, your nice words over here and for our 6th anniversary.
Well, I have to say something.
Yes.
Well, this session opened my eyes because that's taught me that I have to prepare my students and myself more than I thought. Because we have to follow a lot of structure in order to make easier to a student to talk. And also encourage ourselves to talk, because sometimes, as Catherine says, it's not easy for us as a student and sometimes as a teacher to talk, because we are afraid to make mistakes in front of the students, as the students in front of the peers and the teacher.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah, this is like connected to what I mentioned before. Our students could be focused on form or focused on meaning, and we are aware of those things too. We also, like teachers, especially as teachers, we want to be focused on form, not to make mistakes in front of others. Come on, those things happen. What's the big deal? All right, well, people, I really want to thank you all for your participation today. And there are more things that are coming, obviously, this year for the PD Talk series that we have and we run at Centro Cultural. And Mark is going to be explaining a couple of other different things. From my part, I really want to thank you for all your contributions. And well, at some point, I guess we're going to be meeting again virtually, at least.
Well, Jonathan, yes, thanks again. Really appreciate that. Let me go ahead and share the screen. So I have class tonight and I'm going to be teaching my students superlatives. All right. So I wonder if I can get a little creative here. This is your 6th PD talk, which makes you the PD talkerist. Of course, I'm being creative there. So thank you again, Jonathan, really for always being willing to contribute to the professional development of our community, our international community of English teachers. So everybody, if you could give Jonathan a round of applause there. If you got your cameras open, give him a wave or a thumbs up or say thank you there in the chat. So we really